Welcome to the Flawed, Foolish and Fantastic Podcast.
Right, so thank you for coming on to the Flawed, Foolish and Fantastic Podcast. I don't think you had a choice. I was counting you down for a long time. Basically, Flawed and Foolish and me and my cousin. We are Flawed and Foolish and we'll come to learn from yourself. You are fantastic. You are the number one podcast we go on. So yeah, I follow you massively and I was quite delighted to come on your show, let alone anything else. So I appreciate that. So if you're happy, saying we all right to go ahead with questions?
Yeah, definitely, man.
Right, first question is supposed to be an icebreaker, but it becomes the most difficult for some people. But who is Amar Singh Panesar?
Oh gosh. So first of all, thank you for the introduction. I find it really humbling and also quite funny when people like yourself, and I've had it when I've done podcasts with like Govinda Man, Kamalpreet, etc., where they've said similar things, and I always find it hilarious because you guys are the ones who like inspired me to do what I do. So yeah, it's interesting to see how that circled back.
We're the old men. You got to remember, we're the old men, and we were having this before you go into who.
Yeah, definitely.
We're having this conversation with Govinda today, and the reason why we started this is because we're in our 40s and 50s. And we're going, where are our 20 and 30 year olds? Where are they?
Yeah.
So for us to see somebody step up and go, okay, I'm going to handle this myself.
No, thank you.
And that's the thing. So
yeah.
So for us to be a buddy and getting, it's like somebody when you see the no-keepers when one of the old boys gets a camera in front of them, and that's what it's like. So for us, it's like somebody knows who we are. We're old now, but it's glad that. So.
No, but I think also with like you touched upon age, and I think that's something that I've become aware of it. Like, so for argument's sake, you're talking to my dad before we started recording, and you can see how much that generation knows, and they know whatever in their different fields. And I just think, for me, I have I have had, and I still have the privilege of having a father like I have, and then therefore having the Sangat that we have by default. So growing up with, like, going to Arvind's house, who is one of the, like, probably the leading academic in Sikh studies, like, puts it into a different field for me, because it's not academic, it's like just family and friends.
Yeah.
So then seeing that generation grow up and me getting to a point where actually I think I have a rough idea about what I know and who I am, but then what about the next generation? They're not going to grow up with people like
a good son, good
yeah. And I'm not the greatest individual, so how can I possibly kind of save some of that knowledge or that essence and pass it on? So I guess in a nutshell, that's kind of why I did or do what I do, inspired by people like yourself. In terms of then who I am, God, where do you start with that? We can start chronologically, I guess, as every historian would do. I guess I think
that'll be easy because we're going to ask about your childhood and family.
Yeah.
So let's go.
Well, I guess I think probably the most defining feature is the fact that I don't come from a typical Punjabi Sikh background. In that, so father's side of the family, obviously originally from Punjab. My grandfather's pind was Gangraiya, which is near Flawed, and my grandmother's pind, I've forgotten, but she was a Plahi.
Research for this podcast.
Yeah. I can't even remember now. She was a Plahi, and I can't remember what the pind was, but I've got it written down in my notes. Anyway, but dad was born in Africa. Dad's parents were also born in Africa, and then I think the generation before were the ones who moved over from Punjab. Most likely, and again, I haven't been able to pin it down. Either they were indentured labourers or we were traders, and depending on which one makes a big difference, because one kind of didn't have money and one did. But I've never been able to pin down like where or what. Yeah. Then. From Kenya, my grandfather happened to be associated with the political scene at the time and kind of disappeared at one point. And so, kind of a long story short, the family had to leave and we ended up in England.
Really?
Yeah.
Sikh Archive have done a really good podcast. I can't remember who with that Amar Singh.
So
Kenya?
yeah,
So were they linked to him?
yeah. So my dad would be able to
Okay.
fill you in a lot more, but then my granddad. Essentially, what happened was my granddad was drinking buddies with the president or the dude, like the highest guy in Kenya at the time.
Yeah.
And when things turned, essentially he got kidnapped,
Yeah.
and he reappeared in London,
Okay.
and basically ran my grandma and was like, "Yeah, get the kids and come over." But this is 1972.
Okay.
And Britain has just enacted a law in 68 which basically limits the number of coloured folk coming from the empire.
Yep.
So to get around this, and this is really interesting, my grandma's brother-in-law owned a travel agents at the time.
Yeah.
He booked them one-way tickets on his name, and they basically got into the country as illegal immigrants and then like naturalized or whatever. So that's the dad side of the family. Mom's side of the family then, mom's dad, Hindu Bengali Brahmin, born in Calcutta, probably one of the most intellectually gifted people I've ever met.
Yeah.
Got like, so I can't remember what it is, but he came like third or second in the whole country of India, which is just insane on its own, to get a scholarship to come to the UK to do his PhD or to do whatever it was. And it was during that he met my grandma.
Yeah.
Now, my grandma was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white
Yeah, I've seen the pictures of
Christian
your grandma.
woman,
I've seen it,
who was born in St Helens, which is a little place near Liverpool,
That's a shit out, man.
basically. And it always has been. It always has been. And
the only good thing they got is a rugby team.
Yeah,
Rugby
yeah,
league team, that's
yeah.
it.
And she would say, and this is she would say the same thing. She loved rugby, absolutely loved
That's the only
it,
thing they got.
and that was it.
Yeah.
And what's quite what puts it into contrast, the different sides of the family, is the fact that I've been able to trace the white side of the family back to like 1500s, 1400s, and I can tell you where they lived, where they worked, who they married, where they died, who their kids were, if they changed jobs, literally everything you want to know. But I literally can only tell you the names of my grandparents' grandparents, and that's it.
That's fine.
And that kind of then spurred me into wanting to find out more. I've always wanted to find out more about our family history, just because you've grown up with being told, well, like, we're refugees, we've come from a different country.
Yeah.
And also the fact that you don't, like, I know we fit in, but you also don't fit into the wider system.
No, you
Like,
don't.
do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, as in, within amongst
You can
ourselves.
assimilate between a certain group, but you're not naturally accepted by
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
That's it.
And I sit right in the middle of that because I'm, in some eyes, half white, and in other eyes, half Punjabi, half Sikh, half whatever you want to call it.
It's called a mudblood in Harry Potter.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I used to call it half caste until I was told recently.
not allowed to say that
yeah,
anymore?
exactly.
Whoa, I had somebody say that to me not long ago. I was like, you can't use that term, it's racist. I was like, I don't know if it's racist, but I won't use it again if it means
Yeah.
I'm offending someone.
So I got told you can't use it, and like
Mixed race.
I grew
Same
up
mixed
with
race.
that being the term,
Yeah.
right? So so that's the family kind of background history. I guess it has shaped. Well, it definitely has shaped then how I've grown up, because I've always grown up in a very open, like intellectually open household.
Yeah.
Just because of the fact that like you have this whole like. So we grew up with.
You're a melting pot of religions.
Yeah,
aren't
yeah.
you?
But it was really cool. Like, but I'll give you a story which really puts into context, right? So my grandfather's the Hindu in the family,
Yep.
okay? And just following labels, you would assume he'd be the one who would be educating me on things like, I don't know, Mahabharata or Ramayana or whatever, yeah? But do you remember the old ZTV series that was the Mahabharata one?
Yeah. The original one or the remake?
I think it was like the one, I think they replayed it in the 90s, so I don't think it was the original.
So yes, that's going to be the original one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So my grandma's mate used to record them on VHS,
Yeah.
and then she'd get them obviously on tape, and then we'd watch them, and she would literally pause at intervals and then explain, because I could kind of, just watching it, you can kind of figure out what's happening, you kind of keep track of
It's
whatever,
old Hindi as well, isn't it? Old
and you could
Hindi.
read the subtitles,
Yeah.
but she would pause it and make sure I understood. She'd transliterate it into English. And yet she's from a Sikh background. So I grew up with being so I had Punjabi class in kind of Santia from my grandma. and then we'd be watching ZTV Mahabharat in between.
Yeah, we all do that.
And it was epic. So I grew up not knowing really the differences. I don't like, as in for me, there was no, like, it was all kind of blurred and it was all a bit
It's what we
muddled.
The problem is, I'm just going to start. For some people, there is a difference, but we see Dharam as Dharam. Righteousness is righteousness.
Yeah, completely.
And that's why Guru Gobind Singh Ji puts all that within the Siddhasam Granth.
Yeah.
Because he sees no difference. It's Dharam and a Dharam.
And this was what was beautiful though, with kind of later in life, then coming across and being educated about Dasam Granth, was you were making those connections, and I was like, so I was reading Bani, which would be referencing Duryodhan, and you wouldn't understand, like, and it would be referencing the anger or the jealousy of Duryodhan. You wouldn't understand that unless you'd read Mahabharata because of the context of Duryodhan being such a knob, right?
Yeah.
And it was just beautiful. So growing up later in life, making those connections was great. But kind of as a upbringing in childhood, it was always so just diverse and really brilliant. On the other side of it, as you can imagine, with every kind of immigrant household, education is key. So from like year 4, year 3, it was like as much work as you could do extra, do it. Like, do it. And we were really pushed. At the time, I probably hated it. It definitely paid off. Like, so we did well at school, we did well at university. Things like academically were really good. Yeah. On the behavioural side, it might have been a little bit different. But academically, we were always really pushed. And then in terms of, I guess, from there to kind of now, so when I was in secondary school doing my GCSEs, I don't know why, and this kind of, I guess, actually like this one incident shaped kind of the next 10 years almost, which was they decided to kind of use our year as a guinea pig year. And so essentially what they did was they made everyone sit tests in year 9. And if you got over a certain amount, they would push you to do your GCSE a year early. Yeah. Which sounds on paper brilliant. Yeah. Sounds like...
if you're not prepared.
No, exactly. And it also has a knock-on effect for university places. So they pushed me to do my maths and my history a year early. And I was like, yeah, fine. Did my GCSEs, got A's in both. Brilliant, cool. I can concentrate now on the rest of my GCSEs. And the school are like, no. You can now do your A-level a year early. So you can start your A-level a year early too.
So you were 16 and you started your A-levels?
So I started my A-levels.
I wasn't ready for it when I started it.
Oh man, Jesus, it was. So I was doing my AS levels at the same time I'm finished. So I'm doing AS history and maths at the same time I'm doing GCSE, English, science and all the rest of it, right? A-level maths was so hard. I did the first 2 modules and I just was like, yeah, I'm quitting this. I'm not even sitting the exam.
Was it pure statistics?
It was C1 and C2. So it was like the core, like it was the base. Like I did C1.
He did that. I did that. Yeah, it was the worst thing.
I did C1 and I was like, I can just about scrape a D. I did, and also for someone who prided himself on his academic, like getting high grades, going from getting straight A's at GCSEs to then seeing, it's just such a like kick in the nuts. Yeah. So yeah, C1, C2 dropped it. I was like, I'm not doing this. But history, absolutely loved it. Like I just, like as you could imagine, right? Just excelled. I remember one of my exams, I got like 96% in it, and the school were just like best mark ever or whatever, right? So I was like, oh, I've got this in the bag. But the problem is when I applied to university, all of the universities turned around and were like, yeah, you got a great academic record, but you sat your A-levels in different years. So although you sat them early, we're looking at that just as though we look at people who spend an extra year.
Gap year,
So you've actually put yourself at a negative rather than a positive.
Yeah.
By that point, it's too late. I can't.
You can't go back a year.
It's done. And so for someone also who's been like, all right, academically, I'm going to smash my GCSEs, I'm going to smash my A-levels, I'm going to go to the best university I can, I had to go through clearing. Okay? And I remember getting my GCSE results, and I'm sure, my A-level results, and I'm sure my dad can probably attest to this. Because of the way the house is set up, like I have to walk towards my mum and dad's bedroom to get to the bathroom. Yeah. And he saw me in the morning with my results. I didn't even have to say anything, I just burst into tears, because I was like, I've spent fucking... I don't know.
3 years, 4 years, or basically since you were a kid.
Yeah, like you're just working towards this pinnacle of, right, work hard, and it's always this whole like idea, especially as a child, of if you keep doing like things will work out, things will like they'll be right. Anyway, Dad did recommend. He was like, "Why don't you take a year out and then go to university later?"
Yeah.
He goes like, "You've done whatever, you got your grades, you know you're gonna get in."
Yeah, because you don't have to wait on anything.
Yeah,
it's
sack it
going
off.
to be a conditional offer, isn't it? Straightforward.
And I was like, "Oh no, I want to." And I had this thing of you have to go through academic life at the right age. So I always had this thing of if I'm older, I'd hate to do it. Change my mind now, but anyway. So Dad was like, "All right, why didn't you do that?" And I was like, "No, I don't want to do it." So I went through clearing. And like, bear in mind, I applied at like Warwick, Oxford. Like I applied at the best universities I could for history, right?
Yeah.
I think I only got one offer. And
But you didn't go to De Montfort, Nottingham, Trent,
No.
Aston. What?
No, I don't want to start like a university.
Anybody who's been to those universities, give them a shit like.
yeah. Anyone who's been to, I guess, like slightly better than whatever.
Anybody who's been to a polytechnic, contact not basically.
But again, like as in, and this all kind of builds into the narratives. But like I had an academic pride, and I guess to some degree I still have it, which was like I want to go to the best places. I want to achieve the best. I want to be like the best I can. And it wasn't about bearing.
It's about making sure that the opportunities you have after university
Yes.
are worth it.
Yes.
And you've not just wasted 3 years and have gone, man, you've gone to a university that used to be a petrol station 3 years ago.
But it's also like,
nothing.
if you've been given the chance,
You get the best.
take like as in make the most of it. Like I'm not saying like I know being academically smart is difficult. Like we're not naturally gifted.
Yeah.
But it's like I was watching a podcast yesterday called The Filthy Five, and they had this footballer John Arnaisa on there. He used to play for Liverpool.
Yeah.
And there's another dude on there called PK Humble who started to play in like one of the lowest leagues of football. And he's asking John Arnaisa, who's like won Champions Leagues and whatever, how do you get to that level? And he's like, from age of 12, I would train 3 times a day. And everyone, and like to you or I, you're like, what?
Yeah.
But then he's actually like, no, I'd get up an hour before school, I'd go for a run, I'd go to school, come back, eat whatever, go to the gym, or like go do whatever football practice for an hour, and then have dinner, and then run for an hour.
Dedication.
Yeah. Now going back to when we were younger, Mum and Dad pushed us academically. Like we were doing GCSE books when we were still in primary school, but it paid off because then when we got there, you were like, "Oh, I've already done this. This isn't new, or I'm not challenged or whatever." So yeah, so I went through clearing, and I wanted to do either history or law, and because I'd just found history so easy and also like got the best grades in it, I was like, I might as well do history because hey, it'll be easier. Like the chances of getting a first are just higher than me doing something that I find difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
So I went to clearing, ended up finding Royal Holloway, which ironically is the same university my dad went to,
Okay.
which is pretty kind of funny in the scheme of things. And at the time it was like top 10 or something for history. So I was like, yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Thumbs up. Went there. And then the best thing was they actually paid me like 1,500 quid, like grant or bursary or whatever, because my A-level results were of what like however
Like
high.
scholarship level.
So I was like, this is sick. I was like, I got 1,500 quid just to turn up. Like, this is brilliant.
Yeah.
And I loved it. Like, I absolutely loved it. I don't think I've had a better time ever. Like, it was just awesome. And everyone listening to this is probably like, oh yeah, he probably got up to loads of partying and he got up to all sorts. Yeah, that definitely happened.
Well, that's normal. That's university.
But the best part was the fact that we had an academic space where you could just kind of explore. So I don't know how, and I actually can't remember the modules, but like in my second year, it was called like our half project. So it was like 5,000, I think it was. If a dissertation's 10,000, then it was like 5,000 words. And it was, the whole like agenda or objective was to go and find a historical narrative that like, go find a popular historical narrative, but then explore it and kind of discover whether it lives up to its truth or not.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, I'm sure you've heard
Some
on
people look at Troy and things like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's what they look at. They look at the Greek or Roman escapades normally.
Or like even like we were talking earlier, that Sikh Archive podcast about Beghal Singh, and that historian saying, well, actually, Beghal Singh never. There's no historical evidence to show Beghal Singh actually putting a Nishan Sahib anywhere in Delhi, which throws the whole popular narrative into disrepute. So that was the whole agenda. That was the whole objective. So I was like, let me pick something like that I find interesting.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna look at Sikh Maryada and how. Basically, does today Sikh Maryada, in like as in the SGPC one they made in the 30s, how does that stack up to all of the earlier literature and historiography, and basically kind of is the popular narrative we hold true today actually the truth, so to speak, right?
Yeah, this is interesting. So which...
So the SGPC...
I know that. That's the standard that you're going to...
So then I went and found like the Daya Singh Zatanama.
So you went through the
Samada. All of like, as many as I could at the time, right? And a lot of them were digital copies or buying them in from India or whatever.
You got Gunda Singh's book as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And then also using like Mahan Kosh, because it references different things which don't appear in the later Rehat etc. And then also just pointing out things like the SGPC that says not to read Chopre Sahib after Pauri 24, and if you go and read why, it's because it references like the Divine Mother, right? Yeah. So I was like, this is nuts. And like, you got to bear in mind, I'm a 18, 19-year-old. I've come from a religious background. It's just a religion, and I've also grown up in a heavily AKJ environment, so it's very rigid and black and white at this point. So when I'm reading this, I'm like, oh my god, like I'm actually like, it's like a revelation for me. It's not actually historical research; it's actually a personal revelation to go, holy, like as in why, like as in, and then actually because it's like that usurps one of the key fundamentals of Sikhi, which is you don't edit Bani. If Bani is Sacha and pure and everything we hold it to be, who the F are we to be editing it, right? So coming across things like that, but then also there's obviously greater differences. Like Prem Samardik says all sorts of crazy, like not crazy things, but it's crazy in the modern context.
They are crazy.
Yeah. Like cover your daughter in this and do this and do that and whatever, right? But in that context of the time, you can see how some of these things make sense or connect. So for argument's sake, there's a bit in that's attributed to the Daya Singh Ratnama. Don't hold me to this. That says, don't hold friendship with anyone who learns Persian. Yeah? Fine. But actually in the bigger scheme, that doesn't make any sense because Dasambani is written in...
Not just Dasambani, Guru Gobind Singh Ji. Then you got by Nandalal, who's the esteemed poet in the
like the highest of them all, right? And he's come directly, literally from the Mughal Darbar. So,
and then you got things like, even when you look at Shirin Pasha's time, you got obviously Mohsen Sani. He's going around writing about the Guru at the time. He's Persian,
So it was looking at stuff like this, and then the other kind of biggest find for me, which was like a personal revelation, was coming across how the Panch Kakad evolved over time. Yeah. And when I say that, I need to be careful because...
Well, this is going to be interesting. You come from an AKJ background. So.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So, basically, I came across in all of these Pratan Ratanami and literature, essentially that there's no set standard. Like, no one really agrees. There's an agreement on it being a weapon, being a kishara, and then the importance of gears. Like, that's apparent throughout all of the literature. Like, they don't need to literally say that. That's very clear. But in terms of it being like a prescription of you need to wear these 5 things to belong to this group, that comes on later on. But what's interesting is, if you look at the context, you've got to realise... So, in a modern day and age, you or I have the choice to go to the shop to buy our kishara, so to speak.
Yeah.
Back then, as in to tell you to wear that doesn't make sense because that's just the culture, so to speak. Similarly with Akara, like Akara is a Shastra. By default, Shastra, like that culture was embedded into that time. Like not wearing Akara wouldn't have made sense. So the reason to prescribe isn't there. That's not to say the importance of the Panch Kakars wasn't there, or that they weren't the Panch Kakars. It's just to say that how it formulated changed over time. So I loved, as you can imagine, I still remember a lot of it. I absolutely loved it.
Did you come home with your crazy views and get told, what the hell are you on about now?
No.
That's okay though.
No. Mum and Dad.
That's the good thing about it.
So, and this is what I mean. So academically, I've always loved the fact that Mum and Dad have always stretched us. They've always pushed us. Dad more so because Mum was literally looking after us. But Dad academically really, really pushed us. So I remember having conversations on the way to school, and I'm 13, 14.
Yeah. And
he's like, so before time, what was there? And I'm 14 going, what? Dad, why? And at the time, I'm like, why can't we have a normal conversation about, a football, right?
Yeah.
Dad doesn't watch football. But anyway. But we're having these conversations that make you think and stretch you. And then also, I went to a Church of England school. So they're preaching Christianity to a brick wall, right? Yeah. And I'm like, well, actually, what you're saying doesn't make sense because of this and that. And so a lot of that, rationalizing or just understanding of religion, I'd come back and be like, Dad, this, brr. Yeah. And then we'd have a conversation. Or I'd listen to Bart on the way to school and I'd text Dad and be like, well, in the nun side it says Sunmuk. It's so I'm used to Gudmuk and Munmuk. Yeah, what are all of these different words, man? And then Dad would be like, right, this. And I guess actually what it highlights is a lot of the space or that initiative and that drive to just discover and keep going and just keep looking has actually just been ingrained into us. Yeah. It's always been academically just keep going, but then also because it's been tied into then my identity, there's a personal attachment to it. I want to go and read, as in it's not a chore to go and read all of these books or go and
I know that with you.
Yeah. It's not a chore to do any of that. So I did that essay and then I handed it in. And I remember getting it back because on the form they attach to it when they mark it, she'd written 70 and then rubbed it out and written 69.
Was that code?
No, hold on. The saddest thing was, I was like, oh my God, I was one mark. I know I had the first. She's rubbed it off. I was so and you can imagine, I'm still vexed, right?
Did you dispute it?
I didn't bother. I just didn't bother. And I just looked at it and I went, fuck. And I went, you know what? Maybe there's something to learn from this. So I went, all right, cool. So I did that. Loved it. And I remember publishing that essay at the time and it caused an absolute shitstorm on the internet. And people were like, oh, he's saying Panch Kakars aren't anything to do with Sikhi. And I'm like, no, there's a nuance to it. Panch Kakars have always held importance. The revolution, historically, has just been different. So for argument's sake, Mahan Ghosh references 3 rather than 5.
Because it takes it from a Sarabul.
Yeah.
Sarabul.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then there's one manuscript of Dasam Granth somewhere, I can't remember where, and it has included in it a reference to the Panch Kakar, but none of the other manuscripts do. Yeah. So there's obviously questions in about the authenticity of it. And even stuff like, what is it? Baijatas, is it?
Yeah, Baijatas, Good Katha, is it?
Good Katha. And then the Amar and Ammar, I can't remember who's written
Amar and Ammar, Amar Singh.
Yeah, they both have reference to it, but again, people question whether it's a later, it's been added in later or whatever. I don't know about that. But, so that was the essay I gave that, and that kind of really got me interested because I had to go and read quite a lot, as in, obviously all of MacLeod's works, but then also reading all those footnotes and then finding those primary sources and being like, all right, let me go read whatever, so and so's written at the time, rather than just taking what he said for gospel. And then in our second year, for our dissertation modules, we got to pick. I can't remember any of the other options, but one of them was religious fundamentalism.
Okay.
And I was like, brilliant. Because again, you can imagine, come from an AKJ background, come from a very religious Sikh background. 1984 was a huge thing. I think, to be honest, and I remember actually in 2004, it was obviously the 20th year anniversary, and there was an exhibition at the Gurdwara, and it was just a room like this, and they just had photos up. And I just remember seeing the photos, and they just burnt an image into the back of my brain. And I remember from then onwards always being like, I want to be a lawyer to take the bastards who did this to prison.
Yeah.
And that was that was literally a driving motivation. But then it also spurred me into wanting to know more about my history, because I was like, well, what happened here?
Yeah.
And why did that happen? Because I think for a lot of us, Sikh history is old.
Yeah.
Like, it's some stuff that happened a few centuries ago. No one's alive to talk about it. But 1984 is
so close.
It's in living memory. Like, as in
For
my
me,
older brother.
I was alive at the time. You know, it's that sort of thing. I was 4 years old.
So my older brother was born in 84. So for my parents, they're like, yeah, it was like normal life. Like, as in they were just going on about whatever. So that really kind of got me into wanting to find out more. So pick this religious fundamentalism topic, and essentially the whole module was looking at different cases of religious fundamentalism. So like Zionism, right-wing Hindu nationalism, right-wing Christian nationalism in America. Like, you name every case study, we went through it. And then it came to the dissertation, and so it had to be something related to religious fundamentalism that was kind of new and original or whatever. And so, as you can imagine, I thought, let me see how I can connect this to 1984.
Yeah.
Because there's always this argument, religious fundamentalists took over Harmandir Sahib, and this whole like regurgitated narrative of them being militants and all the rest of it. So, and I kind of took a gamble, but it was also like academically I took a gamble because of the fact I knew my dissertation tutor wasn't an expert in his like in that field. But I thought, I'm only gonna get this chance now. I'm like, I might as well. So the title ended up being outline. So it was something along the lines of like outline the ideology of post-colonial Sikh insurgency in India, or something like that. And it was being quite clear that we're looking at the post-partition kind of. It almost starts with, these are all the ramifications of colonialism, and that all comes from Arvind's Religion and Spectre of the West book, which is basically we went through this process, things changed, the logic of identity changed, religion was created, and I'm very specific on those words because you don't have an organized religion in the way we have today prior to that. We have an organized system, but it's not a religion. Like, as in the Sampradaic system isn't religious.
No, what, and this is where you get the colloquial term of Hinduism.
Yes.
So it doesn't exist. Hinduism doesn't exist. They've just gathered a load of different faiths together, different doctrines together. And God, this is one faith. But the Shaktas, the Vaishnavas, the Shivites, they don't agree on anything. There's nothing that they agree on.
Exactly.
But they're all considered one religion. Like, this isn't one religion. And it's the same with the Sampradayas. Sampradayas are the same. There are differences. We're all under the Khalsa umbrella, I'd say. And that's where it sits, or under the Sikh umbrella, whatever you want to call it. And 95% we all agree on. There's differences.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so the dissertation starts literally with that being like, look, this is kind of where I thought we're at just post-partition. Then it's kind of mapping out kind of the historical incidents that occur between partition and 84 that kind of create this momentum toward this movement.
Yeah.
Then it's the Anandpur Sahib resolution, and then kind of the historical events, but very briefly from literally kind of Anandpur Sahib resolution to just after 84, kind of like 91-ish. But the bulk of it is actually looking at Sanjay Singh's speeches and trying to map out an ideology from that. So being like, all right, what is Sanjay thinking? What is the overarching kind of framework that Sanjay's working with? So when he's saying certain things like, what are the objectives? Where is he trying to get to? So there's a really good book. I can't remember who it's by. I think the dude's name begins with R. I can't remember it, but basically it's a translation of like a whole
speeches,
of a whole wad of speeches.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's good. So like a line on the front of Sanjay.
Yeah. So I bought that. It cost me like 50, 60 quid at the time to get it shipped over from India. Bought that. Then obviously went onto the internet, found loads of recordings, and then there's a Swami Vivekananda or something. Dude turned out to have all sorts of sexual abuse allegations against him in the end.
Yeah.
However, I didn't know this at this time. He'd actually gone. He was on some type of like world peace tour because
he's the one that ends up in front of Sanjay Nelson. He's got his
and he's recorded.
Christian where Sanjay Nelson goes, prior to being 13 years old, you didn't start this, and then basically recite Kabir's Bani saying that when they say Sanjay, you didn't even go into Samadhi and you read what she was thinking.
Yeah,
that's it. And then they go, let's get going.
He's like, oops. Yeah. So he's on some type of like world peace tour at this time. His whole agenda is like trying to nuclear disarm the world, right? Yeah. So he's thought, I'll pit stop in Amritsar and try and have a conversation. So he talks with Sanjay Singh Ji, he talks with Longwal as well. And so I translate that and use that as an appendix, use that book as a kind of a source base, and then also just try and find recordings of Sanjay talking. My problem with is obviously my Punjabi level to understand some of the language Sanjay is using properly wasn't up to scratch. So I tried not to rely too heavily on that because I didn't want to mistranslate what was going on. And then also using interviews and speeches and conversations with people of the movement. So outlined that, did a chapter on Sanjay, then did a chapter on all of the movements. And what was quite interesting, and I haven't explored it since, was how all of these movements kind of splinter and you have loads of different ones kind of emerging and evolving after 1984. And then also obviously the clampdown that the government brings in, which is insane. As in, it's just absolutely like some of the reading you have to do was just
for Operation Woodrose and things
just
like that.
bone blood curdling,
gang rapes and this and that,
and the forms of torture and they're using and all sorts. And then also that the lady who does Joyce Pettigrew, I think her name is the one who did the Faithful Fighters. Like the Indian police raped her. So she went to do all of this research with people who were there. The Indian police, did the same shit to her. And it's just like there is no end to the atrocity that is occurring. So did that as a dissertation, put that in, got a good grade, passed my history degree, finished that, and then thought, I don't want to get a job.
Yeah.
I want to be a student for the rest of my life. And also with a history degree, there's not really many avenues. Like you can become a journalist, you become a teacher, and then it's just like you can try and do whatever else. And I don't want to be a journalist, nor do I want to be a teacher. Yeah. So I unwittingly decided to go and do a law degree at the University of Birmingham. It was the worst decision of my life. I absolutely hated it. I was, again, I think during this conversation, one thing that I find funny is my academic pride has always been the biggest issue. So when I finished my degree, because I got a 2-1 and I was like, yeah, fine, like this was a piece of cake. I thought the same thing about the law degree. Okay. I was like, this is going to be a walk through the park, hardest thing I've ever done. At the same time...
That's because you're applying. You're trying to learn shit that you don't want to know, innit?
Yeah, literally. And it's so...
your mind won't take it in.
It's so dense and it's so boring. And we're doing all sorts of different...
How much case law do I need to learn?
It's so dry. And then we also had other things going on in life which were a little bit traumatic, to say the least. Like my older brother ended up in hospital because we got jumped by a few people who I don't really want... I guess we can't mention. And so, yeah, I kind of got distracted by that. The degree didn't go as well as it did. And then I came out of it and then I was like, all right, like, need to like grow up now, basically. And then from then it was just like working and just that part of life, like working, getting married and all of that malarkey.
All right, let's go back. Let me go back to your family makeup. You've gone through mum, dad. You've got an older brother.
Yes.
Anybody else in the family?
Yeah, so I am one of 3 brothers. I have an older brother, I have a younger brother. I'm obviously the middle one.
That's good. You cleared that one up when you said I've got an older one and a younger one. I didn't know where you sat.
No, I just want to make it clear. Yeah. The middle one always gets bullied, isn't it? That's why.
Always do, man. So your family makeup, three of you.
Yeah, 3 boys.
Mum, dad.
Yeah.
Sounds like a very good upbringing with mum and dad. Sounds great.
A solid upbringing.
Yeah.
I don't honestly,
Yeah.
Now that you're making me think about it, there are bits where you're like, whatever.
Everybody has that shit.
But it's also very privileged because it's well, actually, are the first 100 needs that you want met? Yes. Is the 101st need met? Maybe not. Well, actually, like kind of like rather than shut up in it, like
Exactly.
so it's nothing like we had a wonderful upbringing, and I think the biggest or the best part of it was Dad, because he's also one of 3 brothers.
Yeah.
And also they come from a big family, and they grew up in a really big family environment in Kenya in terms of like everyone lived on the same road.
I was about to say, whereabouts in Kenya? Makindu, Mombasa?
Dad will be more accurate, but
Yeah,
they had a
awesome.
base in Mombasa, they had a base in Nairobi, and they would very much frequent Makindo. So I've been back once in 97.
Yeah.
No, sorry, in 99, because Christian was 2 years old, so it was 99. And we went to Makindo Goodwill. It was a like probably one of the best family holidays we ever had, and it was basically back to the roots.
Do you still have family links out there?
I think they're in flux. So my grandma's older sister used to live out there, but she's now in London.
Okay.
But I don't know if her grandkids. I think her grandkids are still over there.
Okay.
So we have some family, but the majority.
It's a very different place now, because you got it was a Christian sort of country, which has now become more towards Islam.
Yeah.
And then obviously they have their issues with Al-Shabaab and whatnot. So
Yeah.
a lot of Sikhs have left.
Well, I think my grandma was telling. This was a while back. My grandma was telling me how her sister was telling her about how at certain points in the like they just don't go after dark, or like the copper from like the whole area's electric poles is just stripped out one night.
Yeah.
Like as in the craziest things are happening. So yeah, it's certainly changed. And then obviously there was like those terrorist attacks.
Yeah,
and stuff,
the Al-Shabaab attacks that took place. So family sounds good. Education sounds really good.
I was
School
fortunate.
and stuff like that.
I was fortunate. I think what. So I will say this, and then I'm going to run off to go to the toilet because I'm dying for a week. But I think with the education thing was it was the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
So the reason I say that is we've got nieces. I've got 2 little nieces at the moment, and they're very young, and obviously they're at school. And you can go and look at the data. Like the funding for state schools has just plummeted in the last decade or so, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, I wouldn't say it was the best education, but it was a damn good education. It was Church of England school. It wasn't private or anything like that. And we got, like, not everyone at the school got good grades, but, like, I came out decent. My older brother went to just a run-of-the-mill state-run school. He came out with, like, the best grades the school had ever seen. My younger brother went to the same school I did, and again, he did academically really well. But it was just, I think, right place, right time. And also just the fact that you come from a household that prides education.
Yeah, exactly.
They're
It's
just like,
instilled in our
they know,
community anyway,
yeah.
because they don't want us to go through any difficulties and hardships. So
Yeah, and
they
it's
want us to
that
educate.
it's that typical mentality of education's going to unlock.
These
It might
things.
not unlock every door, but it'll give you more opportunities than if not. And I think that, I don't know whether it's changed now, but definitely schooling is it's far worse than when it was. And I don't know whether I'd get the same academic achievement or opportunities I would have then now. I probably wouldn't, and I don't think my grades would be as good either, but that's, I guess, one of those like what ifs.
You've gone through education. What does education lead to after you finish law? What sort of occupation do you go to?
So the running theme of this is I would kind of prided myself on being academically gifted. A law degree humbles anyone who's got an academic ego. But it worked out the way it did. So I ended up with a 2-2. And in the law field, it's highly competitive.
Yeah.
Like, highly competitive. So I've already put myself at a disadvantage. Anyway, I think I've still got the spreadsheet. I applied to 125 jobs. I got 7 interviews. No, I got 7 replies, 3 interviews, and 1 job offer. And I just thought, fuck this. Like, honestly, I was just like, what? And then it was also like stupid numbers. It was like you're getting paid peanuts.
Especially when you're starting.
Yeah, and you're like...
That's not going to cover any of your...
Yeah, and then it's like, it's not even going to cover a living. So it's like, all right, get a job in middle of like nowhere, but then commuting from, for argument's sake, Coventry, it's just not... And then I'm like, all right, well, now what do I do? Anyway, my older brother at this time has just set up a business that's come out of Dad's business, or is just the second evolution of Dad's business, actually, because Dad's still the director and the framework is still the same. Nothing's changed. It's just who's running the day to day. But basically, Dad back in the 90s did a bit of a Steve Jobs. He was like, this internet thing is going to be really big. We should buy loads of URLs. So you name the URL, they owned it. So mortgages.co.uk, creditcards.co.uk, loans, savings, pensions, dogs, cats, beers, diabetes, Islam, Sikh. Just name something.
Yeah,
they had it. They even had iPhone and Apple before. No, they had iPhone before Apple did. And Apple were like, you need to give this to us, otherwise we're going to sue you. And they obviously had to give it to them. So
really? They just took it like that?
Yeah. This is back in the 90s, right? Like this is a different time. And so essentially they did really well with
URLs.
With the URLs. They created businesses out of that. They spent a hell of a lot of time working on that, and then 2010ish or just after, essentially Maryada Brother took diabetes.co.uk, and then we've turned that into a business. And essentially the angle is digital health intervention. So it's all about how using technology we can make you healthier, and it's a lot of it is to do with psychology, what you eat, and loads of other things. And so essentially Maryada Brother turned to me and was like, look, how about you come and work with me for 2 years? I've got a goal that I want to get to, like help me get to it, and then you can piss off and do whatever you want.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, all right. It's been about 10 years now, so...
Yeah, but if it's sorted your life out, and as long as it pays for the bills that you need and you're enjoying it, what more do you want?
So yeah, so
do you sit there going, what the hell did I do this law degree for now?
In some ways, it has helped in other ways. So for argument's sake, in like my professional capacity, I have to do a lot of compliance management, and like we have to be compliant with this standard and that standard and this law and whatever. So having some background is helpful because I know a little, like I know like an absolute dot of information, but it helps in some regards. Otherwise, no, not really. I'm just kind of like, it was like a time filler. Like that was just like to get through 2 years. Yeah,
but in the circumstances of your life at that time, it was what you needed to do.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe at some point it will prove more useful than it has. But equally though, like it's just one of those things. Like as in, it's just like we did it. I've done it. Now, kind of right. Next thing. I don't know whether I would want to go back and like redo it or try and re-enter the law field, but
why?
Yeah, it's just kind of like
why? Yeah,
it's kind of just like it's just at that point.
No, I can understand. So that's an occupation you're still doing to today.
Yeah. So I'm still working there with my older brother, equally with my younger brother. There's a team of about 20, 30 of us. And yeah, it's like obviously COVID and stuff like that had a bit of a knock-on effect, but we seem to be, touch wood, kind of trudging along. And yeah, like I can't complain. It keeps me out of trouble, ish. And just it's just kind of like
that's cool,
having to keep it going.
So the main question, you are Amar Singh Panesar, but prior to knowing you as that name, it was only when I listened to Kamalpreet's podcast with yourself, first one that he did with you, and he's like, and he mentions your name, and I was like, that's his fucking name. I was like, I've known his ramblings from the start. So my next question is, how did Ramblings of a Sikh start?
Oh, okay. So this is actually, I think, really quite funny. Now, at the time, it probably wasn't so funny. So Ramblings of a Sikh started actually from university, from my history degree. So what happened was I got to Royal Holloway, which is in this tiny place called Egham, which is next to Staines. I'm sure everyone's heard of Staines because they've watched Ali G in the house, right?
Royal Holloway is where the Maxwells used to live towards there, isn't it?
So Holloway in London and Royal Holloway are in separate places. Yeah. So everyone always says, oh, the prison. And I'm like, not quite.
No. Royal Holloway is where, like I said, Robert Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein's other...
Yeah. Virginia Waters is just up there. Yeah.
So
and it's got like the most expensive like
that's why I was
properties
just
in the country.
wondering whether that's where you got your bursary from, whether they paid.
No, I hope not.
Okay, that's all right.
I hope they didn't have any funding to do with the university, right?
If the Epsteins and Ghislaine Maxwell paid for something,
imagine. Well, who knows, man? They might have something to do with the university, right? I hope not. So I got to Royal Holloway, and it's which is basically Surrey. It is a University of London, but it is in Surrey anyway. obviously in the first week you go to Freshers Week and there's all of these societies, but there wasn't a Sikh society. So when I inquired, they were like, there used to be a Sikh society, but the guy who ran it has graduated.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, do you want to start one? And then I was like, what? No. Like, I was honestly like, I've got to university. The last thing I want to do is start a Sikh society, man.
Yeah.
Or that
It's a
responsibility.
mission as well.
And then I've got to, like, behave and all of this. Forget it, man. I'm at university, right? Anyway, I'd forgotten about it. Next thing I know, some other thing at the university, who's also first year, started the Sikh society. So I was like, oh, great. So at least someone's doing it.
Yeah.
So the first event they did was like a lecture. And I didn't know the dude's name or anything, and it was just like whatever history lecture or something. I can't remember what it was like advertised as, but it was basically just some lecture. And I was very excited when I got to university because you had space to like explore, and there was a level, and there was also just a level of like intellect, like of just depth that had increased. So obviously everyone understands there's a jump from GCSE to A level, but the jump from A level to university is insane because it's just unlimited. Like you, whatever angle and whichever way you want to go, there is normally a way. Like there is normally something that or literature you can find out. So I was like, this is gonna be awesome. I turned up, and I was just horrified. I was like, this dude is regurgitating the same shit I've heard at Punjabi school since age 5 or age 4 or whatever. Just the same blanket things. Yeah, we got 10 gurus, we got Bunch, Biadi, Jasad. Just the standard kind of formula.
Well, you expected what I did, right? You expect the high questions to be answered when you hit a Sikh site, and then you realise that not everybody's at the same capacity as you. So you got loads of other people who are there going, we've got 10 gurus. Why is there 10? Yeah. And then you're sitting there going, man, this is I learned this when I was 4 years old. What the hell is going on? But that's what happens.
Yeah. And so
somebody else is going, this is amazing. Yeah?
And he's loving it. Like Uncle G's absolutely loving just delivering his bars, and I'm just sat there going, oh. Anyway, this is also at the same time I'm exploring things like the SGPC have created a death metal that says don't read Bart after this body, right? So in my mind, I'm like, they are the devil. Like for me, it's polemic. It is good guys and bad guys, right? Okay. So when he's saying all of this, I'm like, this dude is just lost. He's like lost in it. Doesn't he see that like the SGP? So I actually remember putting my hand up and asking him, like, what do you think about the SGPC that's saying you can't read Bart? Like, I was like really particular, and he just wouldn't answer it and would always divert. And I was just vexed. I was so pissed off at the end of it. So as every vexed student does, he goes home and he's like, what else can I do? So I created a blog, and I was like, what do I call it? So I called it Ramblings of a Sikh, because I was literally like, I'm going to ramble about a Sikh society lecture. Yeah. And I'm also a Sikh, I guess. So let me call it that. And it just stuck. Yeah. And it just worked. And then, because I'd spent kind of... I saw the other day my Twitter handle was created in like 2011, which makes me feel really old. But like, because I just had that for so long, then when lockdown happened and I started kind of researching and reading again because I had so much more time on my hands, I was like, if I find this interesting, I'm sure someone else... Yeah, I'll share that someone else find it interesting. Then I was like, if I want to get this book, I'm sure someone else will want to get this book. And then I was like, actually, I want to... And then I started, like, funny enough, I came across your books, and I was like, bloody hell, these are amazing. And then I was like, hold on. I remember Dad reading... So, like, when I was doing my dissertation, I remember Dad had a pink book that was, like, some... I can't remember what it was, but it was Nirmala something or another. And
yeah, no, Dita Singh Nirmala's...
Yeah.
His Vedant book. I forgot the name of it. I'm so... I can't believe I forgot it. Do you remember it? Barbara Simrith was his first one. They did the Vedant Buddy Pasha. He did that one.
And it's pink cover.
Yeah.
And so when I started reading your books, I was then like, yo, Dad, I swear you were reading one of his books ages ago. And then I made that connection, and I went, actually...
He was solid, man.
And then I was just like, I want to talk to the people who are putting... So for argument's sake, I want to talk to you just because of... I want to know more personally about how Vedanta and Sikhi works. But then also, I just want to talk about some of the stuff that you've translated just because... What do you think of this, for argument's sake, right? And then I was like, actually, if I want to have that conversation, I'm sure someone else will want to know about or is interested in that topic. And then I was like, all right, why don't I do a podcast? And so it was just an evolution of things going.
Prior to your podcast, your Instagram account was quite big already. I remember following that because I was like, man, where's he getting his pictures from? Where's he getting his... And for me, I was just like, who is this person? And I'm just like, there's a picture of picture. And I tell you what, I know you schedule your posts. I'm glad you do because I'm just like, every hour there's something else for me to see. You know, I was just like, because Instagram, you're just like, I don't need to see duck faces every minute. Yeah. And I was just like, I want to see something else. And then I was like trying to click onto all the Sikh ones. And you're just like, yours was one of the main ones I got on.
So this is the interesting thing. So obviously because everyone, like social media is in everyone's lives. And similarly to you, I was like, I see these Sikh pages, but like it's like shallow. Like we don't go deep enough. So for argument's sake, everyone posts, like there's those photos of the Harmandir Sahib from the British Museum that everyone posts, right? And it has the Palace of Maryada.
Same one, yeah.
And I'm just like, that's great, but tell me about it.
Yeah.
Or tell me why it's not there. Or who took this photo? Or how did they take the photo?
Yeah.
Or why has a museum got this photo? There are so many questions.
Yeah.
And then I went... And then also during lockdown, like I was watching so much more YouTube. And like, if you've explored YouTube, some of the most random content gets millions and millions of views. And I'm like, well, if this dude is...
That's my kids watching Peppa Pig videos of Coco Melon every 10 minutes.
Or it's like a remix of like some song, or like just the dumbest things, right? And you're like, well, hold on. If my guy is getting millions of views talking about, I don't know, about the poo he had last week or something, right? What, like, I know I can make more valuable content.
Yeah.
I know that just because I know the people around me and I know they've put effort and time into whatever field. So the Instagram started just because I was like, all right, the only way you can make these things work is you need numbers. Like everything these days works on just numbers. So I was like, all right, if I can build a following on this, I can then direct them to a podcast.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're putting hours of time and money into a podcast.
Yeah, without anybody subscribing and listening.
With nothing. And a lot of the time it isn't because of the person, it's just because of the way the system, like the algorithm works or the system works. And getting that out there to as many people as possible is really difficult.
Yeah.
But then also, it's like, well, all right, I might post a photo that says, I don't know, I might post an illustration that is of Krishna or or a scene from Mahabharata. And everyone's like, oh my God, this is Hindu. But then you go have a conversation, like you go listen to the podcast about Vedanta for argument's sake, and then you're like, hold on. Or you go listen to the podcast about Dasam Granth, and we're talking about Krishna Avatar, and you're like, hold on.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden, that Instagram post and that podcast connects and things make more sense, and then you're like, all right, I want to read more, so then you can go to the shop and buy a book. So it's almost like creating what I wish I had access to when I was at university, because I was like, all right, I know, like I've had the fortune to know Kamalpreet through dad, and so my understanding of Dasam Granth is just far different to those who may not have had that exposure. Growing up in a diverse background, like I've not been so like blinkered in, like, as in there's just loads of things I've taken for granted where I'm like, all right, how can I now kind of try and capture some of that knowledge for myself, but also share it, and actually, let's be honest, make money off it too, because it's like, all right, I need to make this work in terms of I want it to work for the audience, but also I need to make this viable almost so that I can continue it, because you can't just keep investing and you get no return, otherwise it's going to run out very soon, and then what's the point?
We do like us when we're just trying to write our taxes off.
Yeah, well, hey,
that's all right. This isn't monetized or anything, is it?
Surely.
So he's just like, man, I got to write it off. So that's what we're doing. So we'll travel wherever we need to. Petrol spent, everything's done.
As long as you can do that, that's
exactly.
fine. That's fine. So that's kind of how and where, and we need to talk about how we write our taxes off, because I need to know about that one.
He does that.
Yeah.
That's what he does as a job.
Oh, you accountant?
Yeah.
I need to send you my accounts then. Definitely.
That's it. That's what we did for everybody we've been to. It's like, sort my accounts.
Because I just do my accounts myself, and I just submit it, and I'm just like, okay, I hope it works.
Oh, I go to
and him. Touch wood, I hope it's worked. So I don't know. I'll let you be the judge of it. So that's kind of where it's at. And then.
So you thought about, obviously you said you started putting up posts and you wanted to put some context behind the post because other people don't put up posts. One thing I like about yours, I'm a right gunja when it comes to this sort of thing, but I'll put up a picture and I won't say where it's from, because normally I'm just like, I've got millions of pictures on my laptop. I've got this from years ago. I can't tell you where it's from. But you're really good at that, where you say it's from this, or this collection, or the Vincent Thul's collection, or somebody else's, or which is really good because it signposts people to go. Actually, I need to know a bit more about this. And you put context on about which books he's from and things like that, which is really good. And for me, that's why I started following. I was like, man, this is really good. Somebody's actually putting context behind this.
I guess, like, I don't know whether it's just like historians have this like get up, but like footnotes are the go-to. So when I open a book, I'll often get to a point of like, all right, I just want to look at the footnotes now, and I want to see all of the sources they've used. Not because I want to like validate their work. I just want to go read the sources because I know they're going to be good.
That's why I took that in the bibliography's there.
Yeah.
That, one of the books got 200 nearly footnotes.
And everyone goes through it because they're like, all right, if all of this has created this work, there must be so much. Like, there must be so much because there's obviously so much you can't include. Yeah. So I'm a stickler for that because I myself just love footnotes, but secondly, it's not about controlling knowledge. No. Like, I know there are certain like, so if I can take the podcast to some extent is monetized, and there's certain like for argument's sake, to get early access, you have to pay for it or whatever. But in terms of like knowledge on the whole, I try to make it as accessible as possible. So, all right, you might not have the book, but there's a reference to the book. So maybe you Google it, you might find a copy online. Yeah. Great. Now, if I've made that person or that person's now gone and sparked an interest, brilliant. Because then hopefully, if I stop, they'll continue. Or like, as in, it's just like that interest in our heritage. Pardon me. That interest in our heritage doesn't die out. And so hence why I do that. And also because I see loads of stuff online, I'm always like, I wonder where that's from. Or I wonder where they've got that. And a lot of people are quite guarded about it, and they're like, I don't want to tell you, or it's from a friend. And I'm like, what, is this friend the internet? Because like, where are you, like, how else are you getting this, right? And because and it's also just because if you want the knowledge, there's no point you making people screenshot it and then upload it to Google Images to then research. Like, why people, like, there are ways of doing it, but why put people through that? Like, just give them the information they want.
No, I totally agree. No, I totally agree. That's why I chuck everything on the internet I can. So Rambling started from a blog to an Instagram, Twitter, and then it's proceeded onto this podcast.
Well, actually, it's
the podcast started as an audio thing to a video thing. I've seen it.
Completely. So it was a blog. I then got.
You stopped for 2 years, didn't you?
Yeah, I stopped for
missing.
I can't. It was like, I think when I got to my law degree, because basically what was happening, a lot of the history essays I was writing, I could then publish as articles because they were based on or looking at Sikh history. And obviously when I got to my law degree, that changed because you're just doing law. You're not looking at anything Sikh, right? And also because I was like, sack it, I need to focus on other things. But then when COVID came, like lockdown happened, there was only like, how much gym, TV, food, like how much of that could you do? And I was like, I need to do something that keeps my brain going. And I think, and I'd also done one of those DNA testings.
Okay.
So that's what actually sparked a lot of it. I did one of those DNA testings.
See what your ancestry was, basically.
So my older brother had done one and he showed me it. And he was like, if you're going to do one from another company to see what the results are. And obviously negligible difference. But it was just really cool to see it. And then I was like, all right. And then the benefit of that was it matches other people who upload their DNA and then tells you if you're related to them. So I was like, maybe I'll be able to track down some missing link that can explain the family history. Obviously, that's not happened. But in the process, I put together a family tree that I could as far back as I could, went and spoke to all of the old family members, got as much information as I could down. Again, as I was saying, could only get back to like my grandparents. Although an interesting change was like, I think my grandma's dad or grandfather was called Uttam Singh. His father was called, so one of either his father or grandfather was called Bujaram Plahe, and the other one was called something, I can't remember, but something very like Hindu sounding. Yeah. So it was really interesting to see how the names had changed in a line with kind of like what you could map as like the Singh Sabha movement. So it was just interesting to see how that is impacting like your own family, like on a name basis.
Yeah, I'm guessing it would, because what used to be, how many Ram Singhs and Krishna Singhs do we get? We don't get them anymore.
And it was Buja Ram
But we
Prahi.
used to get loads of them.
Yeah.
There used to be loads of them.
Like Hanuman Singh was one of the Jatadars. I don't think you'd ever get.
No.
I've never come across a Hanuman Singh.
No, so yeah, I didn't even think about it.
So I did that, and then I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna have to go about this the hard way.
Yeah.
Which was, I'm gonna have to go and talk to people who are experts in the field about migration from Punjab to Africa, then about people who settled into Kenya, and then about how they migrated. Because actually, I need to try and map my family's journey from a macro level, and then try and hope that in that data somewhere there's some sign to say, oh, here's your family member. And I was like, how can I do this? Like, actually, I was like, how can I do this the easiest way possible? I was like, the easiest way possible is talking to people. So then I was like, all right, a podcast makes sense because I can ask them these questions. But I was like, if it's just about my family history, who wants to listen to that?
Yeah.
Then I was like, all right, let me start reading. Then I started reading like just newspapers. So then I got a subscription to like the British Newspaper Archive.
Yeah, we've all got that.
Started going through that. Then I was like, shit, this stuff's really interesting. So I started sharing that.
Yeah.
Then people were like, this is really interesting. And then that just sends you down all sorts of avenues. And so it was just almost like, I don't know, it was just almost like a coming together of loads of different things that actually I want to do this. And then actually, well, all of this information's come out. I can do this with it. Then it's like, well, there's all of this data on the internet. So if I can say pretty much 99.9% of the photos I get either are off the internet or out of a book.
Yeah.
And people are amazed at it. But what I find interesting is all I've done is I've just gone and found it somewhere and then just shared it. And I think that also flips the idea that there's like, we don't have Sikh history, or there's no, like, you can't see it. It's not physical. It's written in books. Well, actually, no. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's literally everywhere.
It's just going out and finding it.
Yeah. And so in the process of me discovering it, I'm like, all right, well, let me share this. Let me share this. Let me share this. And it's almost now, like, I was leading it. It's now almost leading me. So when I see certain things, I'm like, no, I have to share that. I need to get a photo of that, or I need to find more information out about that. And it seems to be working. So